Good evening, night owls, and thank you for joining me on another quiet, late-night journey. I'm happy you're here. Feel free to get cozy and let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Your support and companionship mean a lot. If you enjoy these gentle historical explorations, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It truly helps keep this little fireside going. Tonight, I invite you to relax as we travel back in time together. We're heading into the deep past, back to the Stone Age, to discover the clever survival tricks, the life hacks, if you will, that allowed entire families to endure winter nights when the temperature plunged to 40 degrees below zero. No need to shiver. We'll be learning in a warm, safe space here. So go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan or some soft white noise in the background. Nestle into your bed or favourite chair and pull a blanket up around you. Take a slow, calming breath. Tonight, we journey back roughly 20,000 years to the height of the last ice age. Picture a world locked in ice. Glaciers glinting under the moonlight. Endless plains of snow swept by a cutting wind. In this frigid landscape, somewhere on the steppes of Siberia or the tundras of Ice Age Europe, a small family huddles around a flickering fire inside a simple shelter. Outside, the night is vast and bitterly cold, around -40 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that each breath crystallizes in the air. Yet they survive. How? What secrets did our ancestors know that kept them alive in a world where simply staying warm was a daily triumph? Tonight, we'll explore those secrets together, gently and in detail. The Ice Age world is unimaginably cold and immense. Great sheets of ice cap the northern continents, locking up oceans and lowering sea levels. Winter nights last long and dark, especially in the far north, where the sun may not rise for weeks. In these frozen worlds, humanity clings on in small bands, scattered across the vast snowy expanses. By around 20,000 BC, people have pushed into places previously thought uninhabitable. They roam the Siberian Arctic and even trek across a frozen land bridge into North America. Without certain innovations, such journeys would have been impossible. But our ancestors are resourceful. They have learned to turn the very forces of nature to their favour in clever ways. You can almost feel the stillness of a Paleolithic winter night. Imagine a faint green aurora shimmering overhead, the only light apart from the crisp stars. Beneath that sky, the world is hushed by snow. Herds of reindeer and bison migrate in the distance, and woolly mammoths trumpet softly as they trudge through drifts. These great animals are walking provisions for the Stone Age families, moving sources of meat, fur, sinew, and bone. The people know the habits of the herds intimately. Their lives follow the rhythm of the animals and the seasons. If the herds move on or winter proves harsher than usual, hunger is a real danger. One poorly timed blizzard can seal off the rivers and drive game away for weeks. Survival is a delicate balance, and every member of the group, from the strongest hunter to the small child, has a role in maintaining it. Life at -40 degrees Fahrenheit is life on the edge. Frostbite can nip exposed skin in minutes. A moment of carelessness with a fire or a missing fur mitten can mean the difference between life and death. And yet, people love, and carry on their daily tasks in this environment. Perhaps they even get used to it. After all, your ancestors didn't have a thermostat to fuss over. Still, the challenges are constant. Historians still argue whether the brutal climate alone could have wiped out entire groups. Some even wonder if the unforgiving cold hastened the end of the Neanderthals, or if human ingenuity always found a solution in time. What we do know is that ingenuity abounded. Slowly but surely, our forebears figured out how to turn a freezing world into their ally. They found insulation in the fur of beasts, shelter in bone and earth, warmth in controlled fire, sustenance in the animals and even the marrow of bones. They formed tight-knit communities to share both burdens and knowledge. In the face of relentless winter, they met nature with creativity. Every trick, no matter how small, made a difference. They would need all of them for the long night ahead. And as you listen, notice how these solutions intertwine. Clothing, shelter, fire, food, and community, each reinforcing the others, creating a web of survival. Sometimes it's the littlest things that keep you alive at 40 below. Let's begin with the most personal line of defense: what you wear against the cold. In the Ice Age, clothing isn't a fashion statement. It's a lifeline. The only thing between a human body and deadly cold is a well-crafted second skin. Our ancestors became experts in turning animal hides and furs into warmth. Think of a Stone Age winter outfit as a head-to-toe survival suit. Soft fur-lined boots, layered leggings, a hooded parka of thick reindeer hide, mittens and hats, all meticulously tied and sewn. Without such gear, humans could never have settled in places like Ice Age Siberia or survived the journey across Beringia. Even Neanderthals, stockier and more cold-adapted in build, would have needed to cover about 80% of their bodies to survive the glacier cold. Archaeologists suspect Neanderthals mostly draped themselves in simple shawls of animal skin, which offered some protection but left them vulnerable to wind chill. Homo sapiens, on the other hand, mastered the art of tailored clothing, fitted jackets with sleeves, pants, and enclosed footwear hold in heat far better, and making them required new tools and skills. Historians still argue whether this difference in clothing technology may have given modern humans an edge. But the evidence is clear that our species did develop sewing tools that Neanderthals never did. The oldest sewing needles ever found come from early Homo sapiens sites, tiny slithers of bone with an eyelet, dating back 40,000 years in Siberia and about 30,000 years in China. With those simple but revolutionary tools, Ice Age people could stitch together form-fitting, multi-layered garments that kept out even the cruelest wind. Take a moment to appreciate what that means. Using a bone needle and sinew thread to turn reindeer hides into something akin to a parka and trousers. This wasn't easy work. Hides had to be scraped and softened, likely with bone scrapers and stone tools, and then pierced over and over with precision. But the payoff was immense when scientists discovered a 20,000-year-old sewing needle in a Siberian cave. They immediately recognized it as a key to survival. It was finely crafted, with a pointed tip for punching through tough hide and a drilled eye to pull thread. Thread itself probably came from animal sinews or plant fibers, strong and flexible. With such a toolkit, an Ice Age tailor could make clothes that we might actually recognize today as parkas or boots. An entire family might wear matching fur outfits, not to look stylish, but to stay alive together. Though, as a light aside, even in the Ice Age, people enjoyed a bit of style. Some ancient needles may have been used for embroidery, and beads and shells have been found that were sewn into clothing as decoration. Function first, but a touch of flair too. Perhaps they took pride in a nicely made coat, much as we do. The origins of clothing go back much further than 20,000 years. In fact, an unlikely source tells us when humans likely first donned skins. Lice. Genetic studies of human lice show that body lice, which live in clothing, diverged from head lice between about 80,000 and 100,000 years ago. In other words, by that time, our ancestors were routinely wearing something that a louse could hide in. We don't know for sure if it was Homo sapiens or perhaps even Neanderthals who started this trend. But clearly wearing furs was an ancient practice. Early clothing might have been simple draped animal pelts, but over a millennia it became more sophisticated. By 50,000 years ago, people in cooler parts of the world were likely using awls, sharp bone punches, to make holes in hides. And by the Upper Paleolithic, roughly 40,000 to 10,000 years ago, eyed needles appear across the northern hemisphere, from Siberia to Europe to the Americas, signalling a true sewing revolution. One study found that in what is now Siberia and China, humans developed these sewing needles as early as 45,000 years ago. In Europe, they showed up by about 26,000 years ago, and in North America by 13,000 years ago. This suggests multiple groups invented or acquired the technology independently. Cold climates all converged on the same solution: make better clothes or perish. What were these clothes like? Based on archaeological hints and analogy to recent indigenous Arctic peoples, we can imagine they were layered and effective. A base layer of soft fur turned inward for warmth, perhaps a tunic or shirt and leggings, and an outer layer of tougher hide to break the wind. They likely stuffed dried grass or moss into boots for extra insulation around the feet, a trick traditional Arctic dwellers used even in modern times. They wore hoods or hats of fur to conserve head heat, and mittens on their hands. Some researchers have even tried to calculate how many garments an Ice Age person would need. One estimate suggests that to survive a Eurasian Ice Age winter, a person required a hood, a tunic, pants, socks, and shoes, plus a heavy coat on top, essentially 4 layers on the torso. If you've ever shoveled snow in 2 sweaters and a parka, you can relate. The difference is these clothes were all handmade from wild animal hides. Every piece represented hours of labor in hunting, skinning, scraping, and sewing. A fur coat might have taken hides from several animals and painstaking stitching with a bone needle under dim firelight. It's no wonder that clothing was literally a survival tool. A well-made fur outfit could mean the difference between life and death during a cold snap. Parents would carefully outfit their children in furs as well. One can imagine a mother wrapping her baby in rabbit skins and tying them snugly, ensuring no little toes peeked out into the freezing air. And at night, the family likely slept bundled together under additional hides, effectively creating a heap of blankets out of reindeer pelts. It wasn't exactly a modern down comforter, but it did the job. As you envisage this, you might smile at the thought that our love of warm blankets on a cold night is nothing new. It goes back to the Stone Age and beyond. In a way, a pile of animal furs was the prehistoric equivalent of an electric blanket, albeit without the electricity. Of course, even the best clothing wasn't enough by itself. If you were caught in a blizzard out in the open, no amount of fur would save you for long. The Ice Age family needed a shelter, a place to retreat from the wind, conserve body heat, and maintain a fire. So next, let's step inside the ingenious dwellings they built. From snow-covered huts to even houses made of bones, to see how they created a safe haven in an unforgiving world. Clothing kept the cold at bay, but shelter provided a true escape from it. In the Ice Age, finding or building a good shelter was paramount for survival. Some lucky groups had access to caves or rock shelters. A deep cave could act as a natural insulation from the howling wind outside. But caves were not always available where people roamed, and they could be smoky and dark. More often, families had to build their own homes in the snow-covered wilderness. The solutions they devised were as inventive as they were effective. One striking example comes from the plains of what is now Ukraine and Russia, around 20 to 25,000 years ago. Here, archaeologists have uncovered mysterious circular structures built from mammoth bones. Yes, entire huts made of bones. Imagine a roughly 10 to 12-meter wide circle of enormous mammoth tusks and skulls, stacked and interlocked. These frameworks would have been covered with animal hides, sod, or even snow to create walls and a roof. The result was a dome-like hut, large enough for a small community to huddle inside. The thick mammoth-bone walls provided support and also insulation against the cold outside. Many of these mammoth houses have been found near ancient river valleys. They date to the absolute coldest phase of the last Ice Age. Truly a time when shelter meant everything. Scientists believe these were winter dwellings, used to survive the long glacial season when temperatures were lowest. In fact, around the bone huts, excavations revealed rings of large pits. What were those for? Possibly they stored food catches down in the frozen ground, or even stashed extra bones and ivory to burn as fuel. It appears these Ice Age builders planned not just the house, but the whole home site, to sustain them through the brutal winter. What would it be like inside a mammoth-bone hut? Surprisingly cosy, we suspect. The bones themselves might have been draped with furs and hides, forming an inner lining. A fire would crackle in the centre. Many of these huts have central hearths, identified by ash and charcoal stains. Several families, perhaps an extended clan of 20 or 30 people, could fit inside the largest structures, sleeping and working in close quarters. We can imagine an oily glow of lamplight dancing on ivory tusks that arched overhead as roof beams. It must have felt a bit like living inside the ribcage of a giant beast, which, in a sense, they were. These were the remains of mammoths that once roamed the steppe. Now their bones sheltered human life. There's a poetic symmetry in that. Anthropologists marvel at the ingenuity, using the most abundant big resource, mammoth carcasses, as building material when wood was scarce on the frozen plain. It was recycling Ice Age style, and it worked. Historians still argue whether these bone enclosures were purely utilitarian shelters or if they also had a ceremonial purpose. Some have speculated they might have been used for rituals during especially harsh winters. It's possible they served both needs: a sanctuary from the cold and a communal space for spiritual comfort. Either way, the effort put into constructing them speaks volumes. These were not temporary lean-tos. They were sturdy homes meant to last through an entire glacial season, or to be revisited every winter as a base camp. Not all shelters were so grand, of course. In many areas, people built simpler huts out of wood, earth and hides. When the ground wasn't too frozen, they could dig a shallow pit to form the floor of a shelter, creating a pit house partially underground. The earth itself insulates the space, keeping it warmer in winter and even cooler in summer, by acting as a natural blanket. Pit houses have been used by cultures all over the world in cold climates, and archaeologists have found ancient examples in Siberia and beyond. A typical design would be to dig a circular or oval pit, perhaps a few feet deep. Pile the removed soil around as a berm, and erect a dome or cone of wooden poles over the top. The framework could then be covered with sod blocks, brush, and animal hides to seal out drafts. A narrow entrance or even a tunnel might lead inside, sometimes through a hole in the roof that doubled as a smoke vent. Inside, a central hearth would provide heat and light. These semi-subterranean homes were wonderfully efficient. Experimental archaeology shows that a pit house loses far less heat than an above-ground hut of the same size. The earth banks keep warmth in, so a small fire can make the interior positively toasty compared to the bitter open air. Many such dwellings were likely used only in winter, with more portable tents or huts used in summer when travel was easier. We might think of them as the original winter cabins, snug hideaways where a family could wait out the coldest months before moving camp in spring. In fact, indigenous peoples into the 19th and 20th centuries, from the Arctic to the American Southwest Highlands, still built pit houses for winter use, highlighting what an effective design it is. We should also mention the simplest but perhaps most charming of cold climate shelters, those made of snow itself. Freshly fallen snow is actually a decent insulator because of the air trapped between flakes. The Inuit and other Arctic peoples in recent millennia famously built igloos, domed snowblock houses, for winter hunting camps. Did Ice Age humans know this trick? It's very possible they did in some form. While we have no direct evidence of Paleolithic igloos, we can imagine that someone stranded in a blizzard might have dug into a drift to make an emergency snow cave, or piled up snow around a tent to cut the wind. Even a wall of snow around a hut could reduce wind chill significantly. So the concept of using snow as a building material may well date far back. What we do have evidence for is that people were extremely adaptable with materials. In forested areas, they built log lean-tos or teepee-like huts of wood and hide. On the treeless tundra, they used bones and earth. Where there were stones, they might stack stone walls for windbreaks. Whatever the locale offered, humans turned it into shelter. Thank you for listening so patiently to these ancient tales. May the quiet strength of our ancestors bring you comfort tonight. You're wrapped in warmth, surrounded by the invisible shelter of knowledge and history. The darkness outside is quiet and calm. Rest now, knowing that dawn always comes, even after the longest winter. Keep that little spark of human warmth alive in your heart as you drift off. You are never alone. Across time, we are all under the same sky, finding our way. Sweet dreams.